This morning we get a couple of contrasting stories. The one in which Jeremiah is possibly threatened himself for the things that he said. And in his story, it is the prince, who is probably the king, who directs that his life be saved. And thus he is saved from being handed over to the people to be killed. In the second story, we see St. John the Baptist, who is the one that has run afoul of Herod. And it is Herod who, because of what John says, has him put to death. So there's a little bit of a contrast in how those two things happen. But what we also recognize is that the story of John the Baptist is a precursor to what happens to our Lord. Now, in the story of the beheading of John the Baptist, we also see that in Herod, we see a demonstration of sin and weakness on multiple levels, and how when he's confronted with somebody who is good, someone who tells the truth, that he chooses to react negatively rather than to amend his own life. And that happens all the time. John the Baptist had the audacity to call Herod out for taking his brother's wife as his own. Now, as a historical footnote, the historian Josephus tells us that what the story really had been was that Herodias had actually married her one half-uncle, and then after that had married her second half-uncle, who is this Herod. And sometimes within families, those names could be similar, so thus the names Herod and Herodias. Nonetheless, regardless of the specifics of Herodias's shopping around within her own family, the essence remains the same. Herod had taken a woman to be his wife who was already committed to another from his own family. Now, it's often true that for those who have invested so very much of their lives in sin, sinful choices, and the benefits or the perceived benefits thereof, when they're confronted with good, with someone who tells them the truth, when they're confronted with what real goodness is, sometimes they're so invested in the sinful lives that they've chosen that rather than change their lives, they double down. They are afraid of losing everything that wealth and power and fame that they might have attained through sinful means have brought them. So Herod obviously had a lot to lose if he were to admit that he had been living sinfully with Herodias. Herod and his family only were ruling in Rome because ruling in Palestine because Rome had allowed them to. So if at any point Herod's standing in the community might be threatened, and it was perceived that he might not be able to maintain good order, Rome wouldn't have hesitated to make a change. So we can see clearly how Herod feared any challenge to his authority, even from a lowly prophet like John the Baptist. So, recognizing this, as St. Matthew tells us, Herod had John arrested for telling the truth about Herod's sin. And when in the presence of all of his guests at his birthday party, he was actually called upon by Herodias' daughter to defend himself and to stand up to John. She asks, as we hear here, for the head of John the Baptist. She's challenging him to double down on the choices he's made. And he gives in to the moment, and he orders the beheading of John the Baptist. All told, what we can see here is another one of the dangers of what happens when we acquire so many material possessions, whether it is wealth, whether it is power, whether it is fame, whether it is good standing in the community. I'm not saying that any of those things are bad, because of course they're not, but it is how we attain them and how we hold on to them. Because the more attached we are to those things, the tougher it is to choose God and to choose what is right. What happened to John the Baptist, of course, as I said earlier, happens later on to our Lord himself. As our Lord became a perceived threat by the Pharisees and the chief priests, Jesus eventually paid with his life for telling the truth about sin. And so it is in our day today. The church stands up for the truth, the full truth, about sin, about morality, about life, about the will of God for us, about the universal call to holiness. And for that, the church is either ridiculed or persecuted or both. Sometimes we're called haters or bigots for telling the truth. Still, we know that this life is transient and that what matters in the end is the life to come. That's why John preached what he preached. It's why Jesus taught what he taught and why he established the church and why the church says and does the things she does today. So let us remember from John the Baptist's example that sometimes we might very well be reviled for standing up for moral truth, and we might pay heavy prices for that. But in the end, with John the Baptist, and of course with our Lord himself, we couldn't be in better company. And if we hold to the truth in our lives, as we know them to be, as revealed by our Lord himself, we will enjoy the eternal benefit that comes from that in heaven.